I just ran the 2023 Los Angeles Marathon, and here is my full review of the race and how my experience was running the LA Marathon as my first marathon. I'm Joseph, and welcome back to my channel. It's Tuesday, March 21st today, so I've had 2 days since the LA Marathon went down, and I'm well on the road to recovery. I can actually talk now. My voice is still a little bit gone, but it's getting a lot better. That being said, the LA Marathon was my first marathon, so here is my experience on the LA Marathon and on my first marathon. So I have my notes right here in front of me, so I'm gonna be bouncing from the camera to my laptop and back to the camera just to make sure I'm covering everything that I want to cover in this video. The LA Marathon was significant to me mainly because it was my first marathon. I'd ran just one official in-person half marathon prior to this race, as well as one virtual half during COVID. Scheduling wise, it worked out well because it was the end of spring break, so my wife and I went with the kids down to LA for a few days, and the vacation ended with the marathon. Being that it was my first marathon, I really just wanted to complete it and to really just leave it all on the course and learn about the distance, learn about myself, and see what I can bring out of myself from the pain and the suffering and difficulties and the challenge of running a marathon at a decent pace. In terms of what I expected myself to do, I thought I was capable of running a 3 hours flat. So my goal was to run about a 3:05 to 3:10. That way I can always just accelerate towards the end and pick up the pace if I do feel good. But being that it's my first marathon, I don't have experience in running that sort of distance. So I didn't want to push too hard. I hope my voice isn't too bad, but we'll get to that part of the story when I lost it. It is coming back though, which is good. Over the few weeks before, I kept checking the weather on an hourly basis. I was obsessing over the weather because here in Vegas, the winds were reaching 40, 50, 60 mile an hour every single run. And I knew I did not want to be running into heavy winds. Also in LA, they've been getting a ton of rain the past few months. And I was a little nervous about the rain, but less so than potential for wind. Throughout the lead up and throughout the last couple months of my training block, I read every single review. I watched every single video on YouTube on the LA Marathon course in order to prepare myself both mentally and physically, as well as just obsessing to scare myself. Bad idea. That being said, going into the race, here's what I expected. So I expected there to be a ton of incredibly steep hills. The course itself is a net downhill, but all the reviews that I read were talking about the climbs, how steep they are, how sharp they are, and they really can destroy your legs. So that's something that I was really thinking about and a little bit nervous about because I don't consider myself to be the best hill runner, especially downhill, which we'll get to soon. The out and back at the end, mile 18, you pass the finish line, and then you continue out along Santa Monica, make a couple turns, turn around, and then come right back along the same route and the same road that you ran out on, which, according to all the reviews that I read, was absolutely momentum killer and incredibly challenging from an emotional and mental standpoint. I'm gonna talk about that more because I had an incredible experience and I learned so much about myself and about life from those few miles. So I'm gonna talk about that soon. I also saw that there's a lot of places with no crowd support, especially during the out and back, and the further you get from the finish line, the less crowd support there was, which was somewhat true. So getting to my training and my expectations and what I was feeling before the race, I had a bunch of long runs over 14 or 15 miles that I had a lot of stomach issues. I hadn't fully figured out what the issue was and what was causing it all, but my last minute emergency plan was to go with no caffeine gels and only have one caffeine gel just in case I need it at the end. I carried 6 gels with me. They were Cliff gels, and I was only able to get a hold of one flavor that was non-caffeinated. They only have 2 flavors that are non-caffeinated, but then I also took one gel with caffeine just in case I needed it at the end, but it was only 25 milligrams of caffeine. I also knew that it's a net downhill race, downhill running was definitely my biggest weakness, and it still is my biggest weakness. So I knew that it was something that I'm really gonna have to focus on during the race to not burn myself out on the downhills, so that I can just keep going throughout the whole race. Friday morning, we went to the expo, which was absolutely incredible experience. A ton of phenomenal brands, and the energy was amazing. It really got me hyped up, got me ready to go, got me excited, got just really took away all the nerves and just got the excitement out, which is really what I needed. Some of the brands that I love are Coros, my favorite watch company, not sponsored, but I love them. Maybe one day they'll give me a sponsorship. I also met someone who lives in the area that I was staying. And he was getting a ride to the start line. So he was also in my corral, which was nice. So he offered me a ride to join him. I was planning to take the shuttle to get to the start line, but he told me that he took the shuttle one time and it was a complete disaster. There was a ton of traffic. They pretty much just got out on the highway and walked about 45 minutes to get to the start line. So I was glad that I didn't have to do that, although I do expect that they've improved it since then. So I was placed in Corral B, I was told that there was going to be a 310 pacer in that corral. I was looking around, I didn't see any 310. I saw 320, 330, and a couple others, maybe a 340, but I saw a 310 out in the A corral, so I knew I had to get to him as quick as possible. My plan was to just hang with the 310 pacer for the first 15 to 16 miles until after the big downhill. And then after that, if I feel good, to pick up the pace just a bit, because remember, my goal was to leave it all on the road and to not have any energy at the end, to completely collapse at the end, having spent everything I had. And then if at 15 to 17 I was struggling, then I would just keep with the pacer. I wanted to wait till after the big downhill because of how bad I am at downhill running. So the traffic to get there was not bad at all. It didn't take us too much. There was some traffic towards the end, maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes extra from traffic. We got there about 5:45 or 6 o'clock, and the corrals closed at 6:30. So I knew I had to get to my bag drop, get to use the bathroom, and get to my corral quickly. So I went through the security and off to the bag check, but the walk to bag check must have been 15 to 20 minutes. And I was walking quickly. It's not like I was walking slowly. The walk to get to the bag check from the drop off was going through the open corral. So I was squeezing through all the people who were already waiting to start the race. And here I am just trying to squeeze through everyone. It was a complete mess, a complete disaster. And I needed to use the bathroom pretty badly, but I figured, let me get the bag dropped off. In the worst case, I'll just have to stop in the middle of the race, which I was kind of expecting to need to do either way. So I'll just have to stop a little bit earlier. By the time I got my bag dropped off, and I finally managed to squeeze myself back through the crowds, I got back to the corral, the entrance of the corral at 6:27. The bathroom line was out to Jamaica. So I knew there was no way, and I needed to use the bathroom pretty bad. So I just figured I'll have to stop at like mile 1, mile 2, use the bathroom, and then just continue on and hope I don't burn out my legs from all the stopping, something that I'm not used to doing on my training runs. The start line was insane. It was amazing. The 30 minutes that I was standing in the start line felt like 3 minutes. I didn't have time ready to warm up, although I did walk pretty quickly and even run a little bit to the bag drop, but I didn't have a full warm-up time, which is something that I know for the future to not expect to be able to do a full warm-up. I did just do some muscle activations that I often do before I start running, before I work out, but in terms of a full warm-up, I wasn't able to do that. So I was looking for the 3:10 pacer. I couldn't find him. So as soon as they opened the gate, I just bolted to him. And I was determined to stick to his heels as close as I possibly can. The start is just a mad downhill. And I stuck right on my pacer, the 3:10 pacer. The start line is pretty much just a mad, crazy rush with just like a bunch of bodies rolling down a hill, because it's right out the gate you're running downhill and everyone's excited, everyone's hyped up, and the pacers are trying to find their rhythm, everyone's trying to figure out what they're doing, and it is just a crazy tumble down that first hill. It settled down pretty quickly in terms of that crazy rush to get out of the start line. But I knew at mile 3 there was the big climb, which everyone spoke about in the reviews, which I was a little bit nervous for because I hadn't really tested myself on regular road hills, and I didn't even know what to expect of how steep this hill was. It turns out, for me personally, this hill was really not that difficult. I kind of felt like by the time I got into a rhythm, by the time I got into the idea of running up a hill, it was already over. Maybe that's from Vegas being hilly, or maybe it's just from those few trail runs and mountain runs that I did over the past few months. I don't know what it was, but for whatever reason, the hill at mile 3 really did not cost me as much energy as I was expecting, which is great. After mile 3, everyone settles down, and the next 10 miles are pretty much just rolling hills. None of the hills are anything that you have to slow down for the climbs or fly down for the downhills. It was all just very moderate or easy rolling hills that you can just cruise and keep a nice steady pace for. The issue I was having was that my pacer was really flying. I asked him towards the beginning what pace he's trying to hit, and he told me 305 to 308, and I thought that was perfect. That was exactly where I wanted to be. But just every time I saw him look at his watch, he's like, ooh, gotta slow down. And he was consistently hitting 645, 650, 655s. For the first 5K, we were averaging 659. After 10K, we were averaging 657. Then at 15K, we were at 658. 20K, we held that, and we were still at 658. 25K, we were at 659. 30K, 659. 35K, we were at 7 minutes average pace. So he was going out way too quickly for what he was planning to do and what he was supposed to be doing. The aid stations were really good. They were about every 1 or 2 miles. I don't know exactly. There were a ton of volunteers. I didn't see anyone who tried to get either a water or an electrolyte drink not be able to. There were enough volunteers for everyone, even with all the cups going flying. But the bathrooms were a lot less frequent than the aid stations, and that was getting me a little bit nervous. Mile 13, I started thinking about stopping for a bathroom. And I just kept telling myself, let's just go for one more mile, one more step, one more bathroom break, one more set of bathrooms, one more aid station. The downhill at mile 15 really took a toll on me, more emotionally and mentally than it did physically, because I just felt like this is going to hurt me down the road, and not that it was actually really taxing me as much as I thought it was. I was contemplating slowing down at that point, and I really didn't want to, especially not until mile 18, where my wife and I had made up to that she would meet me at mile, it's about a corner, at about mile 17 and a half. And so I just wanted to see my wife and kids before I throw in the towel and before I start slowing down, because I knew once I see them, I would get this big wave of energy and it would really motivate me and help me to continue going. The other issue I was having, that I realized at mile 15, was that I wasn't drinking the electrolyte drink that they were serving at the aid stations. I had my own electrolyte mix that I was using, Noon pills, that I've just been using my whole training block. And the plan was that when I see my wife at mile 17 and a half, she would hand me a second bottle and I can throw out the first one. That way I'd have enough fluids, I don't have to carry too much from the beginning of the race. And I realized that if I don't see her, I would run out of fluid pretty quickly. I was going to run out by probably mile 20 to 22. So I knew I had to focus on just getting to her, focus on getting the bottle, a good handing off the bottle cleanly, and then I can think about what's going to happen after that. So I pushed through mile 17. I was so excited. I turned the corner before and I'm like, I'm going to make sure I was on the left side of the road, exactly where we planned to meet. But a part of me also realized, like, coming with two kids, including a 9-month-old baby and a 4-year-old, the chances of them both behaving enough that she can get out on time to find the parking lot and then find where she's going, to find that corner, wasn't as high as it would be nice to be. And I did realize that there is a strong chance that she wasn't going to be able to make it. And that kind of just stuck in the back of my mind, like, what if she's not able to? What if the kids are being complete disasters and they're all throwing a fit and she's just trying as hard as she can to get out to see me, to help me out, but she's struggling so much. And then I kind of realized after a little bit, like, even if that's happening, I have to focus on my struggle, because she would feel even worse if I told her that I had to slow down, pull out of the race, or DNF, whatever it is, because I was thinking about her struggling. It would just make her struggle feel even worse. So I realized I have to block all of that out and just focus on my own race and really just get myself to the end. So mile 18, I had passed that corner. I realized I wasn't going to see her, and the reality was hitting in that I didn't have enough fluids. So a part of me wanted to just slow down the drinking, and then another part of me wanted to just continue drinking as much as I need, and then I'll worry about running out once I've ran out. I also started taking in a little bit of water. I took twice water, but I never practiced taking the cups or anything in training because I wasn't planning to. But it went well. I mean, the only issue I had was I was feeling a little bit warm my face, so I poured the water over my face, and then when it drained down onto my shirt, it got me really, really cold. And I felt really, really cold with a wet shirt after pouring the water on myself. After that, the race started to get more challenging. Mile 18, I passed the finish line, and that's when I realized, like, here's this out and back they're talking about. This is going to be horrible. And I was just emotionally draining myself, thinking about how difficult this is going to be, how challenging the next 8 miles are that I'm going to have to get through, because it's going to be horrible because everyone else was talking about how bad it was. Turns out that wasn't the case in the end, but I'll touch on that soon. So my plan was to take 5 gels over the course of the 3+ hours, and at the 2-hour mark I realized I had only taken 3 gels, and the last one I had just taken about 5 or 10 minutes earlier. So I was wondering if I had underfueled or if I was feeling okay. The issue was that I was nervous to take them too quickly because of my stomach, and I didn't want to have to force myself to the bathroom quicker than I needed to. So I kept having this back and forth inside of myself of, well, you're going to need the bathroom either way, but on the other hand, why make it quicker? But on the other hand, you don't want to run out of fuel, you don't want to hit the wall. And it was just an emotional back and forth that I was going through, trying to figure out when I should be taking in my gels. That being said, I realized I had like an hour left, and maybe I could just push through all the way without stopping for the bathroom if I take in one more gel. So I was going to take in my last gel at about 2:20 and see what happens. So after you pass the finish line, it is a wild crowd noise that you cannot slow down from. You cannot lose momentum or lose excitement or lose adrenaline. It was wild. That finish line was incredible, and just hearing that noise really helped me keep going. I was nervous about this part, but here's why I actually really enjoyed the out and back, and what I really learned about myself as a person, as my life, and just life in general, what I learned from it. So I realized that I was gonna see the winner and the second place and the third place and the fourth and the 10th. I'm gonna see all of these high-level pros getting towards the finish line and struggling to complete the race. And I really thought that was gonna be exciting, because this is super cool. I get to run. I'm actually racing with the pros. It's not just like I'm running in the same race as the pros. I'm gonna pass them. And like that was a wild thought to me, that I'm gonna be watching the winner run down Santa Monica Boulevard while I'm in the same race as them. I just thought that was incredibly cool. So I kept my eyes glued to the other side of the road and finally saw the motorbikes going past. And I saw the first pros going, and the look of her face, or his face, I don't remember who I saw first, but you can see how much pain and struggle that these runners were in, how much they were pushing through to get to the finish line. And it kind of made me realize that they were 4 miles ahead of me, because I was at about mile 20, 21. They were about mile 24, 25 when I saw them. And it made me realize that when they were 4 miles ago where I am right now, they were also struggling, because they were just struggling faster than I was struggling. And look where they are now. They were able to push from where I am to where they are, and they're still going, and they're still struggling, and they're people, they're humans who are struggling to do the same thing that I'm doing. And as I saw them, some of them, I saw their facial expressions, some of them were walking, and it just made me realize that everyone around me and everyone I can see is in as much pain as I'm in. And if anyone around me can do it, why can't I? And that really gave me the motivation to keep going, to keep pushing through mile 20, 21, 22. And it really helped me get myself to be able to just keep going. At mile 22, I was still averaging about a 7-minute pace. And I was hanging with the 3:10 pacer. But at that point, I started to fall back a little bit. I gave it everything I can just to get back on his heels, because I knew with all the wind, with everything going on, the more I can stick with other people, the easier it'll be. They'll break the wind for me. They'll hold a steady pace that I can just hold. And it's always just motivating to be behind someone and just trying to keep up with them and catch them. So after I got dropped the first time, I was maybe 10 feet behind him. I pulled back up and I got back onto his heels again. Maybe 30 seconds later, he dropped. I start getting dropped again. And at this point, I realized that I'm not going to be able to hold with him. So let me just try to keep him in my vision. And in the worst case, I am 10, 20, 30 seconds behind him. And in the best case, I have energy towards the end that I can catch back up. So I managed to keep him in my sights for quite a while, although he was still flying and I was slowing down a little bit. The out and back, the first half of it, maybe to mile 23-ish, was really, really loud. And it was a ton of people watching, a ton of spectators and bands and choirs and all of that. It was really, really loud and exciting there. But then as I got to, I don't even know where it was, turned off Santa Monica, got to under these bridges towards the turnaround, it got really quiet under the bridges. It was also windy there, so that didn't help. But at the turnaround point, it got a little bit loud again, and the turnaround isn't as sharp of a turnaround that I was expecting. I was expecting it to just be going around like a centimeter and some cones in the middle of the road, but it was a wide street that you were going around with grass in the middle of the street, and it was a pretty wide turnaround, so it wasn't too difficult to do the actual U-turn. The hills on the way back, which were supposed to be really difficult, I didn't really feel them. Maybe it's because I was just so destroyed at that point, or maybe it's because they were very slight inclines. They weren't incredibly steep or anything. So I was just trying to stick with anyone at that point. Anyone I can see who either passed me or I caught up to them. I was just trying to stick with them for as long as I could until either I got dropped or they got dropped or whatever happened. It was just a mess. I was just trying to hold on. We were all just trying to survive. At this point, I was running about 7:30 and I felt like my cadence was really dropping. On my watch, I didn't have cadence. I took off cadence and heart rate because I didn't want to see them. Because those are just things that, they are what they are. They don't matter and they're only going to mess with my head. So I didn't want to see them. And then at mile 24, I got my first little cramp in the inside teardrop quad muscle, the vastus medialis. But it really didn't slow me down at all. It really didn't affect me too much. It was more of just something I had to keep an eye on and just make sure that I'm not overdoing my right quad, that it doesn't go into a full-blown spasm and cramp. My pace slowed down a little bit more and I was just trying to keep it sub 8-minute pace at this point. And then I realized, let me just stop looking at my watch because it doesn't matter anymore. It's just going to mess with my head. And let me just get to the finish line as much as I can without walking, without stopping, without needing any of these breaks. That's all I wanted to do. So the finish line actually was changed from last year. that was a big one of the complaints that I saw in the race, was that you have to turn onto Avenue of the Stars, and then the finish line is right when you turn, so you don't see it coming ever. You don't have time for a sprint finish. You don't have time to mentally prepare. Maybe it's a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing. But I saw the finish line. It was on Santa Monica. I saw it from pretty far out because it's a pretty straight street. So I saw it before I crossed mile 26 marker, way before. And I could taste that finish line. I could smell it. I started getting really emotional because I had written myself off from running a marathon about 10 years ago. And now I was actually about to complete a marathon with quite a respectable time of, low 3 hours. I didn't know it would be exactly, but I knew it would be something pretty solid for a first marathon. So after the 26-mile mark, there's this tiny little downhill, maybe 100 feet, not even, less than 100 feet, and then a tiny little uphill. And as I was running down the downhill, my downhill issues destroyed me, and I completely cramped up. First my right quad went, then first my left quad went, then my right hamstring just completely spasmed, and I went straight down onto the ground. It felt like I was laying there for about 5 minutes, but looking after, it must have been about 5 seconds. I just rolled over and started crawling because I just wanted to get to that finish line as quickly as possible. At this point, I was just losing time for no reason. So I just wanted to get to that finish line. But it's a slight uphill, so it was difficult. And then the crowd around the finish line started cheering me on, and that really helped me. So I was able to stand up and kind of walk, sort of gingerly walking, more like wobbling forward, until I realized that I need to summon some inner strength that I have never before used. And I stopped walking. I tensed every muscle in my body, and I just screamed with everything I had, "Let's go!" And I screamed over and over and over, "Let's go, let's go." And that got the crowd into it, and it got me going, and somehow it managed to get me running. And I just kept screaming, and I was high-fiving everyone as I was running past. And I went until my voice would not let out a single sound. And at that point, I was maybe 15 feet from the finish line, and I just busted myself to the end. And I crossed that finish line, and that's why I have no voice. So I crossed the finish line, I fell straight down onto my face, and I thought I was fine. I thought I just needed to lay down for a minute and then I'd be okay, and I could just, go see my wife and see my kids and go home and live happily ever after. So the medics came to me, and I'm like, I'm fine, I don't need anything, I'm good. I managed to get myself back up after a little bit, and I got my medal, got pictures, took a drink of water just to pour over me and drink a little bit. And then I just started getting really dizzy. So I sat myself down next to the barricades, and some runner brought me a bottle of electrolyte drink, and I downed it in maybe 3 seconds. Eventually I managed to get myself back up. That was probably a little while. And I just dragged my body towards the medical tent. And I asked them, can I just get a chair to sit on? Just a few minutes that I can recover a little bit. And they're like, come, let's take you, come. So I'm like, okay, I don't know. And I just sat down, Thankfully, they had put the chair there in time for me. And they took me to the tables to get stretched out for my cramping. So I had three PT students working on me. They were absolutely phenomenal. I really appreciate what they did. I actually had I had a lot of fun talking to them. You know, I went through PT school also, so, you know, and I wish them a lot of luck in the future because they're entering a fantastic field and they were great people, so I hope they have a ton of success. I borrowed one of their phones to call my wife just to tell her I was okay. And then I finally got myself to the bathroom. After the bathroom, I kept walking and walking and walking, and that was kind of the theme of the finish line, walking. I got some food. The bananas were perfect, delicious. I also had an apple and some bars. I don't even know what I ate, but the apple was delicious. It just got me really, really cold after the marathon. And then I had more walking. I finally got to my bag, the bag drop, and my wife and kids were on the other side of a fence, and I finally got to see them. We kept walking, like them on the other side of the fence, me on this side, until finally a security guard opened up, so we were able to actually get out. And I was actually able to see my wife and kids properly. After that, I went back, showered, and got some food. Now, some takeaways from this race. First, the bag drop at the beginning was terribly placed. It took way too long to get there, too much of a crowd to get there. They should somehow position it in a place that you don't have to walk through the open corral to get there and back. You can just go there through a different way. There were fences, everything was fenced off, so if you could just go around, it would have made life a lot easier. Like most other races, there were not enough bathrooms at the start line, but that's just the way it is. The energy at the start line was fantastic. They did a great job of that. The warm-up process, again, I didn't do a full warm-up because I had to get myself into the corral. And even that, it was okay. It wasn't terrible, just something to note for the future. The pacer I was with was absolutely flying. And that's something I have to think about in the future, to not trust the pacer as if he knows exactly what he's doing. I also have to make my own decisions and realize that they might be going too fast or too slow, and if I want to run a certain pace, that's on me, not on them. And I have to make sure that I am running at the correct pace. From my part, the start line was good. Then again, I was towards the front of the race, so I don't know what happened behind me, if there was people tripping over each other or a mad squish, but it was good for me. On the course, the only real climb was at mile 3. The rest of them were all rollers, and you didn't have to slow down too much for. Maybe, again, I don't know what it was for me, but that's how I felt. The downhill at mile 15 was a huge challenge, really difficult, and that was the most difficult downhill there was for me, and the rest of them were all really tolerable. The out and back, I felt like wasn't as bad as I expected. The way out, the crowds were incredible. The way back, it was a lot quieter. Even though you're on the same street, the crowds weren't in your face, helping you out. So I felt like that was something that wasn't as good on the way back. The finish line was a straight arrow, which was incredible because you could see it from way, way out, which was nice. There was some bad roads and potholes and cracked streets, but it really wasn't that bad. I didn't have any issues with any of them. The aid stations were amazing. They were well stocked. They had a ton of volunteers, a ton of people working them. That was incredible. The crowds were unreal. I had so much fun. I interacted with some of them as I was running past. I had a blast with the crowds. I absolutely loved it. And that really helped me get through. That walk at the end was terrible. It was absolutely ridiculous. There is no need for them to need to make us walk probably another mile after the finish line to get to our bag check and to get to the finish line festivities and our families. That I think was absolutely insane, and it took me way too long to get through to the end, and I don't know. That wasn't something I thought was okay. The medal was nice. Here it is. I wanted to wear it after the race the whole day and night and next day, but honestly, it's nice and heavy, and I did not have the energy to wear it too much for the rest of the day. So what happened to me about the cramping at the end? It was when the grade changed from downhill to uphill. So it kind of put a strange sensation, I guess, on my legs, on my muscles, which just blew them out. Was it that I didn't have enough gels because I only took 4 gels? Maybe, but I think it was just the fluids. I didn't drink enough, and I didn't drink enough electrolyte drink, and I think that's what did it for me in the end. So that's something to note for the future, that I need to drink more. I think the 4 gels were borderline enough for me. If I was gonna run it faster, like a sub 3 hours, then I'm pretty sure 4 gels is gonna be good. If I didn't have any bathroom issues, then maybe I could stick a 5th gel in and just bring them all a little bit earlier. But I think the 4 was borderline okay for my time. I just got nervous because of the bathroom issues. Now, what happened with my wife in terms of the meeting me at mile 17 and a half? So she actually got there on time. She managed to park and everything. The problem was that when she asked anyone from security what directions were, because both of us are not from LA, so we don't know our way around, they kept saying that they can't tell her. I guess they viewed it as a security threat, as some risk. I don't know, but I don't see why it should be an issue for them to tell her where the 18-mile marker is, or where the corner of, I think it was Wilshire, and Santa Monica. I don't know why, but, and then other people also, they just said they can't help her. And by the time she got there, it turns out it seems like it was about 1 minute or less after I had passed that corner. She did manage to get to the finish line, and she was on the bleachers screaming for me, but I didn't hear anything. She saw me finish, but she didn't see me when I cramped up, so I don't know what the view was and the vision that she had of me. The biggest takeaways that I had from the race. So, running specific, the first half of a marathon really should feel easy. And for me, it really felt like I was going on a nice, fun jog for the first 13 or 14 miles till that big downhill. I have to improve my downhill running. I also really have to get stronger. I need stronger muscles, and that's part of the reason I cramped up. And then obviously just endurance. I need to improve. Those three, I'm gonna do more trail running and mountain running, local mountains here in Vegas. And I think that's gonna help me with downhill running, it's gonna help with strength, and it's gonna help with endurance, it's gonna help me with stability and everything else. I also do have to work on my core and hip stability, since I was moving a lot more than I want to, especially as I was getting fatigued. I strongly believe that I can run sub 3 hours in my next marathon, as long as I have good training and the race conditions and the race course is good and fast and a good group of runners. So I actually learned something very big about life from that out and back. Seeing the pros and realizing how successful they look, if you just look at their times and you just look where they are, it looks so easy and so successful and so incredible. It made me kind of think about, when you look around in life at other people, how incredible and easy and successful it seems for other people, yet we don't think about how much struggle they went through just 4 miles earlier when they were in the exact position that I am in at that point. And it just hit me that everything in life is like that, that you really can't just look at successful people and wonder how they got there and just say, oh, I wish I was that successful. Yes, they're faster. Yes, they're genetically better at running. Yes, they've trained harder. Yes, they've trained more. Yes, they have all the right gear and they have everything else. But at the end of the day, they're still struggling the same way that I was struggling, just in faster. And if they're able to push through and get through, why can't I? Now, the same thing happened on the way back. When I was running on the way back and I saw people struggling on the way out, it just made me realize how much I've accomplished. And all I could feel was the amount of pain I was in. I couldn't feel how much I had accomplished. I couldn't feel how much I had grown and how much I had become, how much further I had gotten since I started the struggle, and how much I've gotten through the pain, that when I saw the other runners struggling, I realized I was right there 25 minutes ago and I made it over here. That's incredible how much capabilities I have if I think about how much I've done and how much more I could do. Outside of that, I was wearing the Saucony Endorphin Pro 2, which was maybe a little bit too cushiony of a shoe for the marathon, but I didn't have to think about them at all during the race, which is obviously a great thing, and I would strongly consider wearing these again for another marathon in the future. I had about 65 to 70 miles in them before the race, so they had broken in pretty nice. So would I do it again? If we're talking about it as a marathon, absolutely. I loved every second of that pain. I loved the struggle. As I was laying on the floor, as I was laying on the table getting stretched out, I was just thinking about, this is why I'm doing it, and this is what I wanted it to look like. I accomplished my goal of giving it everything. So yes, I would absolutely run another marathon, and I would run one tomorrow if I could. So the pros of the LA Marathon specifically, The expo was absolutely incredible. Energy was amazing. Huge crowd, ton of runners, great crowd support. Course wasn't too challenging in the end, at least for me. I found it pretty straightforward. Aid stations were really good. And it's honestly the biggest race that is within relative driving distance for me. So that's a nice thing. In terms of the cons, the start line was chaotic, especially with the backdrop. Swag was this shirt. That's it. That's not the biggest deal. The corrals were not so secure. I saw people who were way slower who just snuck into the corral A and corral B, and I was talking to them and they had a C stick on them, and I don't know how they got in because it seemed pretty secure when I was going in, but they did. The out and back part of it, especially under the bridges, was very quiet and I enjoy it. Overall, the race didn't have many views. It was more of a get to see Los Angeles kind of views, which isn't something that interests me that much. I didn't like the fact that no one was helping my wife. They focus so hard on the runners that they forget that the runners want their spectators. That kind of would have helped me a lot get through and would have motivated me a lot. And as well as just I ran out of fluids. There's no spectators right at the finish line, which I guess for security reasons, but it's just kind of a bummer. And that finish line walk was absolutely horrible. Would I do this race again? It would not be my first choice to run the Los Angeles Marathon in the future. However, I do feel like I have some unfinished business with the LA Marathon, so I may have to do it again just to tell myself that I can do it without cramping and without having to stop. Well, there you have it. That's my experience of the 2023 Los Angeles Marathon, where I finished in 3 hours, 8 minutes, and 36 seconds for my first ever marathon.